Hello everyone and a warm welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you, pardon me, it's the weight, Heroes of Normandy by design company Devil Pig Games. Now this is a bit of an interesting beast. It's been around for a while and it is going from strength to strength. It is best described as a board game that's trying very hard and in some ways successfully to be a miniatures game. Now, what do I mean by that? Because it's a bit of a strange claim, and as you can see, the artwork is rather cartoony, so what's going on here? Well, first things first, as you've guessed, the Heroes tactical system, although it re-implements a sci-fi system by the same designers, Jan and Clem, it is set very firmly in World War II, in the Western theatre of war, and the original core game, Heroes of Normandy, dealt with the immediate aftermath of D-Day and the Normandy campaign. It is a purely tactical game. If I show you the reverse of my super heavy box here, you can see that you have geomorphic map boards. We'll take a closer look at those in a moment. A lot of dice and a lot of cardboard bits and even some cards which you can see in the background. But what I'll do is I'll raise the box a bit so you can get a bit of a glimpse. Look at those infantry counters there and look at that vehicle counter. So that is what this tactical game is gunning for in terms of its aesthetics. It looks like a miniatures game even though it is a board game. Now, what on earth is one to make of this? Because, as I said, there's a very cartoony look to this, and you'd have thought a serious war game would perhaps, rely on some photographs or some artwork that's a bit more evocative of the period. But that's not really what these designers have gone for. Yes, they've wanted to create a game that's fun and engaging, and I can vouch for the game certainly being that. But they also wanted this series to be something of a homage to the classic war movies that we all know and love. Everything from, I don't know, Kelly's Heroes all the way up to Saving Private Ryan. It does play realistically in some respects, but it's also a game where certain things are tweaked and characters can perform really well. There are certain named characters. This gentleman here is actually named Clint. He has his own counter in the game, and there's definitely a bit of a nod to every GI that Clint Eastwood has ever played. Yes, it's a difficult game to classify, but what I want to talk about before moving on too much into the components and what the gameplay tries to achieve, is just how, if you can measure the success of a game by how many spin-offs and expansions it's generated, then Heroes of Normandy is a hugely, hugely successful title. Because in addition to the core game, which as I say has not only been around for a while, it was actually very, very recently revamped and reissued, and some of the rules questions were tidied up. But it has generated a vast number of expansions. So I don't own every expansion there is to have for this game. I would like to, but I don't. But I'll show you what I have got. Because a bit more recently, they branched out. So this is not the first of the expansions to come out, but if you want an alternative to the Normandy theatre, Heroes of Stalingrad is in some respects a reskinning of that, but of the core game for Normandy, that is. But it is also a very, very theatre specific attempt to deal with the Russian front. Now, there are no Russian expansions for the base game yet, but having played a couple of rounds of this and a couple of rounds of Heroes of Normandy, I can tell you that they play very differently. The basic rules are the same, and one thing I want to emphasize is this is not a difficult game. It's actually quite an easy game to learn, and I'll be showing you some of the components in a second to help explain why. But just to give you a broad brush as to what's available, there are expansions for St. Mary Glees, for the various Normandy beaches. There's an expansion for Caen. There's an awful lot coming out, and there's also the army boxes. So each faction in the game, the base game gives you the Germans and the United States, but you can bulk out your forces with additional US units if you want even more. You can, of course, bulk out your Germans too. Plenty of German units to be had. And you can even, joy of joys, add the British and the Dominions. So all of that's there too as an option. So Heroes of Normandy is a tactical game where two players set up a particular battle scenario and play it to a successful conclusion. And this is not always necessarily the complete destruction of the enemy force. It is sometimes simply one side has to break through and get off the opposing end of the board, or they have to survive for a certain number of turns, or, very randomly, they sometimes have to retrieve pieces of equipment and bring them together, and the enemy's job is to stop them. Now, I did say just now that this game can be a bit cartoony, and it's a homage to the classic war movies. This comes through in the scenarios you are given. The scenarios in this game are based loosely on the events of the either the Normandy campaign, if you are playing that one, or the Stalingrad campaign if you go eastwards to the Eastern Front. But they are at the same time very non-serious. Some of them are downright tongue-in-cheek. So in the Normandy one, there is a scenario called Saving Private Rex. Rex, of course, is a dog. The dog has a counter, and you as a US Army detachment has to rescue the colonel's dog who's wandered off. Your German opponents, of course, attempt to stop you. It doesn't help that the dog, who is controlled by the game until you retrieve him, wanders in front of a German machine gun post. It's a bit wacky, but there it is. It's good fun. This game is fun. People with who want a very serious treatment of the Normandy campaign or even of Stalingrad should probably look elsewhere. I'll just give you a bit of warning about that, because this game does not. It walks a very fine line, I'll say, between treating the subject in a fairly sensible manner, but also being quite jokey with it. It's a very, very unusual take. Some people might not even consider it a war game. I do, because I think there's enough realism built into the way the units interact. But you'll see what I mean when I get round to creating a playthrough video. But for the moment, let's carry on looking at what you get in the boxes. So just to give you an idea of how large everything is, in the two core sets, you get 6 double-sided boards this big. They're fairly hefty. Component quality is very good here. So this is not from the Normandy set. I've actually pinched these from the Stalingrad set. So you can see it's not a hex map, it's square grid, and you can move diagonally or sort of straight across. Units, of course, are rated for movement. The vehicle movement rules take some getting used to, but they are simple. But you can see it differentiates between natural terrain, woods of various densities. You have the bocage in the Normandy ones. You have buildings in various states of disrepair. Sometimes they're intact, sometimes like this, they've been pounded to rubble, but you can still use them as a fortification. Of course, Stalingrad has certain areas of its map that look like the surface of the moon after heavy bombardments. And of course, you can you can alter the terrain by playing these terrain pieces, so you get more ruined buildings for Stalingrad, not unnaturally. For the Normandy set, you get extra hedgerows, you get farmhouses. One of the many, many expansions you get are additional terrain packs, which are nothing but extra hedgerows. You even get some farm animals, which act as mobile targets, which is a bit of a curious touch, but there we go. They've made the rules. You can take it or leave it. I'll put it that way. The first time I saw the second sheet of the original terrain pack expansion, and I saw a French farmer with his 3 cows, all of which could be manoeuvred as if they were units. I thought, okay, got them because I'm a bit of a completist that way, but haven't had a chance to use those 3 yet. I'll try and get through saving Private Rex and that mission. Other forms of terrain which dissipate, you get smoke templates for launching smoke. There are blast templates for artillery fire. And of course, you get the many, many, many units that you can use in the game. So, quick look at the anatomy of these. When you're setting up your force, you can either set up a force to fight a clearly defined scenario where you have your force makeup given to you. There are a lot of very helpful rules in this game for setting up your own scenarios. The modular terrain lends itself to an almost infinite number of maps that you can create. And there's a handy table at the back showing points values and roughly how much time a game will take if you fight with a 150-point army versus a 500-point army. Whichever you opt for, the first thing you do is you use these handy templates to organize your force. So in this case, we have a US rifle platoon, and you'll see each force tree comes with intrinsic units, which are always included in that force. And what you can do is, taking your pick from the enormous array of extra units, extra bits of equipment, you can fill out your force template by simply inserting the appropriate counter. And of course, the only limitations are, you can see these stripes on the side, you have to conform to the units assigned to the parent formation. So that's actually quite clever. You cannot simply take a unit from a different division, note the color of the stripes, and slot them into one of those. You have to follow the historical table of organization to a degree. There's a bit of wiggle room. You can swap a unit for extra artillery, or a very popular one is extra supply and ammunition. Sometimes you can have a special bonus that turns your men into veterans, basically granting them re-rolls if the dice go badly. Lot of options there. But the units that actually move on the map come in 3 forms. You have leaders, and what I like about this is that regardless of what your unit is, whether it's a leader, an infantry unit. Let's see, come on camera, you can do it. Focus, focus, focus. You're not going to play, are you? An infantry unit, I'll press on. Or an armor unit. The basic layout of the counter is always the same. So the key information, and it's presented very simply so that you can understand at a glance what your unit is capable of. Movement rating, defense rating, and gold is anti-infantry rating, anti-light vehicle rating, and anti-heavy vehicle rating. In this case, the leader cannot attack a tank or a heavy tank at any rate. Little symbols along the sides show extra capabilities he has, so that's the recon ability. A star means he generates a point of leadership. That one means he can flip to his concealed side in certain circumstances. So if he's concealed, the enemy can see that on the board, but they cannot actually fire at him. that little emblem means that he is killed on the first hit if he's unlucky enough to be killed, and that one that he has a close combat assault capability, so he can initiate close combat, and that's it. So you can see very, very similar, well, pretty much identical format on the infantry counter. Everything's in the same place, so at a glance you can tell what your unit's capable of. There's not that many symbols in the game, so once you play a few times you get used to them. I'd say the most complicated units in the game are armor, because in addition to the ratings that we're already familiar with, thanks to the infantry, you've got front armor, side armor, rear armor, and your weapons are divided between your heavy weapons and your light weapons. So basically your main gun and your machine gun. So there's a bit more to keep track of with armor. And of course everyone has their reverse side as well. So if it suffers a hit, this unit flips. And this is where the artwork really comes into its own. I mean, look at this board game attempting to be a miniatures game. Like I said earlier, you get these wonderfully attractive unit counters that look really good. A lot of effort's gone into the artwork to give you that nice top-down view. And I like that on the depleted side, they've taken the trouble to remove some of the poor individuals. You've only got your force is a shadow of its former self. And with armoured vehicles, it gets even more dramatic. If your poor Sherman takes a hit which destroys it, boom, it becomes a piece of battlefield wreckage, which actually prevents entry into those spaces, blocks line of sight, and has a structural rating. So it is possible to remove a wreck through demolition, but you have to pound it a bit. And many's a game I've had where I've had the frustration of seeing an access route into, say, a narrow village street blocked. And I've had this moment of elation where I've knocked out a panzer, going, yes, take that. Only to find that the burning wreck has gone and blocked the street I wanted, so short-lived. In addition to the units, players have rather attractive decks of special bonus cards and action cards, and the play of these is fairly fast and furious, and the game keeps you topped up with them. Aesthetically, they're very interesting because they're the mix of the very cartoony artwork you get on the one side with historic photographs on the business end, some of which have been doctored a tiny bit, but otherwise they're pretty good. So, and some of them are based on contemporary posters, propaganda of the time. It's a nice mix. The cards themselves are very basic and functional. It's very obvious what they're meant to do. They don't slow down gameplay at all, and they give you that extra wrinkle of the unknown and the unexpected. So the only thing that gives you a bit of a jolt is probably the aesthetics, where you go from cartoony to serious. And what about the rule books? Now I'm going to show you the Stalingrad rule book because the Normandy one is buried. Oh no, I've got the scenario book. Whoops. Yeah, the Normandy one is buried deep inside the box, and it would take me ages to dig it out. But the two are much of a muchness. So you've got a very glossy, attractive, if slightly garishly presented rule book. This one is actually an improvement on the Normandy book because it clears up some of the rules questions which plagued the original. So there's an awful lot by way of illustrated examples. The language that they use is very clear, it's very simple, everything's well explained. Usually a lot in this game makes sense, and there's only 3 phases a turn. So there's orders, activation, and then what's effectively a tidy up phase per turn, and scenarios normally only last 4 to 8 turns depending. So it's a good rule book, and very handily has an explanation of all the symbols that you saw on the unit counters on the reverse. So there's a lot going on there. But it's all beautifully done, as you can see. Every element of the counters is explained, so you're not really left in any doubt what's what. When I got Heroes of Normandy out for the first time, I had it out and I was playing it, I'd say within about half an hour of opening the box. The introductory scenario is beautifully simple. It starts you off with a minimum of units. And in fact, if memory serves, in Heroes of Normandy, it's a clash between a US and a German patrol, both of which want to retrieve the body of an officer who's carrying a very tantalizing looking, I'll call it a dispatch case. And there's even a little counter for the dispatch case. So one or other of your units has to successfully retrieve it to win the scenario. So it teaches you the basics of movement and combat very quickly, while adding this little entertaining wrinkle that one side or other has to snatch the briefcase and get it off map. So it basically sets the tone for the rest of the game and the rest of the campaigns you play with it. So that's pretty much the components. I will, of course, as per usual form, be showing you a playthrough fairly soon. I just want to add, because I alluded to the presence of a large number of spin-offs and expansions. The ones I've mentioned and the ones I own barely scratch the surface. If you want to know how interesting this game can get, you do have specialized units for all the factions. With the British, you even get the Hobart's Funnies, the special tanks, Lord Lovat's Commandos. For the Germans, you get you get Wittmann's Tigers, the elite panzers. You get further expansions where French resistance, the Free French Army, is included. There's one called Civilians Under Fire, where you get a group of armed civilians. I think they can even serve as partisans or victims that need to be protected if you're playing the Allied side. But it does get weird in places. Controversially, there are superheroes and supervillains as well. There's a nod to the popular culture around the Nazis dabbling in the occult. There's a huge spin-off branch which I want to get because I'm a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and this is called Shadows over Normandy, and it's essentially the designers porting the Call of Cthulhu onto the Normandy campaign. It is excellent. It looks amazing. I'm going to get it. There's a certain inevitability about that. And there is even, following a very, I think, a sadly short-lived agreement with Games Workshop, Heroes of Black Reach, which uses exactly the same combat system, obviously with tweaks for the different universe, pitting space marines against orcs. Now, with that, I won't talk too much about that. In fact, I'll stop there because that's getting me a bit far away from the Second World War theme that we're going to be looking at. But just to show how adaptable this system is, you just have to look at the sheer amount of stuff that has been made around this core rule set. And I hope that when I get round to showing you how the game works, you'll see why it is quite so entertaining, and why I think people who are slightly intimidated by complicated war games might find this an interesting gateway in. And wargamers who, might like their advanced squad leader level of detail or combat commander might still have time for this game, because I think there is a lot in it to attract even the seasoned wargamer. I mean, it certainly has me. I have my collection that straddles two theatres at the moment. There's rumours that the designers are moving on to the Pacific Theatre. I'll definitely buy into that. But I think I will save further remarks for when I actually do the sample playthrough. In the meantime, I hope this has been an interesting introduction to those of you who have never heard of this game. I doubt there are many of you out there, because this game is fairly well known by now, and it has a lot of adherents. There's a huge following, but I thought it was worth covering it in my usual review format. I really look forward to making that next video for you, and In the meantime, thank you very much for joining me for this one, and always a pleasure to see you guys. A big hello to my regulars, and if you're new to the channel, if this is your first visit, a very warm welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll check out some of the other videos and find something you're interested in or like. But until the next video, thank you all very much for joining me. Pleasure to have your company as always. Bye.